Yeah, so the big news for us obviously is that we were acquired by BBVA. Maybe the honeymoon period, but I've got a really good feeling about this. We spent a lot of time in organising the deal to make sure that we could keep our independence and keep our culture. One of the things that BBVA recognises is that what makes us special is the way we work, and doing a typical sort of tech acquisition and folding us into the mothership would really impair the way that we operate. And so there are a lot of protections in place to keep us operating the way that we've been operating for the past 5 years. Moving from Australia to America, that was about 10 years ago. That was a pivotal step. We had sold a startup company that I was working at in Melbourne, and I decided to go to business school and went to Carnegie Mellon, ended up in New York, and sort of the rest is history. Probably the highest point was the first card swipe. It was a very long road from sort of coming up with the idea, raising capital. It's about 3 years from sort of starting the business to swiping our very first simple card. Probably the year before that moment. There was a lot of upheaval in the financial industry. We've been working for a long time and we never knew if we could actually even do this. So there was a contrast between just the many years it took to build versus actually getting it to work. One thing that I really like doing is, if I'm having a low time, in the past couple of years when we've been live, just log into the customer support queue and see what customers are saying and answer customer questions. It's actually a really way to reconnect you from whatever sort of bullshit you're worrying about, whether it's a slide in the board presentation that you can't get looking right and it's just frustrating. You just go speak to a customer, and that's a really great way to sort of get yourself out of that head zone and back into the realization of actually the slide in the board deck's not the important thing about this business. My blog reading has really taken a tumble since Twitter sort of came around. I think I was a big blogger. That's how I met Sean. I used to read his blog in 2004, and we met via commenting on blogs, which I don't think people do anymore. People now meet on Twitter. And so by the time I was a sort of a heavy Twitter user by 2008, I just read what my friends linked me to. It's really hard to evaluate an investor. If you're a first-time entrepreneur in particular and you haven't been through this, it's very hard to distinguish one investor from another. When we were starting Simple, we had very clear requirements of what we were looking for. We wanted people who understand consumer web. We wanted people who understood finance and financial services, because they're two very different worlds. They operate at very different paces. And having folks like Anthemis involved who just understood this space in a way that we didn't, because I'm not a banker by background, was extraordinarily supportive, because when you're having those tough times, to be able to talk to Sean or Uday or other investors who know the space, and they can say, this is how it works, it's okay, that's comforting. Things take 10 times as long as you expect, particularly in financial services. In financial services, there's a lot of pressure from regulation, and the industry is set up in a way that people are biased towards saying no to ideas. And probably the earliest skill that I picked up in this space was being able to distinguish between the letter of the law and sort of organizational, institutional inertia. Because you'll have a lot of people who just say no because they've never done it before that way, but the law says you can actually do something some way. So being able to press through and understand the underlying regulations to do innovation is pretty critical. Co-founders, it's like a marriage, know your co-founder, get to know them for at least a year before you do something together. That would be my recommendation. If you've worked together in the past, that's great. I met Shamir at business school, and it was 5 years before we did anything together. But I knew at business school if I was ever going to start a business, it would be with Shamir. There's a lot of people moving into financial services. There's a lot of people who are taking traditional VC approach to financial services, and they don't understand the timelines involved, and they don't understand sort of the pressure regulation brings to running these businesses. So you can't take a consumer web approach to investing when you're doing financial services. It's a very different animal.